Today on Locked On Red Wings, Moritz Seider locked down the top pair this year. We continue player evaluations with part 3.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Scotty's host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a sports writer for C&G newspapers, while I am a color commentator for Oakland University, ACHA D1 men's hockey. And today we're going to continue our player evaluations with part 3. We did part 2 on Friday, and I think we did part 1 on Monday. It was a long break in between. We had the Yzerman conference, and then we had Yzerman, the Griffins playing, which the Griffins play again on Monday tonight, by the time you're listening to this, by the way. So a little bit more spaced out than we were anticipating, but hey, long off season, you can always go back and listen to those previous episodes. But before we can get to Moritz Seider and the rest of the evals today, I got to let you know today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. All right, Scotty, I'm going to pop my screen up on here so people who are watching can see the tier maker. What was that face you just made?
Nothing.
Like that. You just did like big eyes, shook your head.
Yeah, no, that was a sentence. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, just as a recap, there are 5 categories we do evals. We don't like doing grades here because we felt they were too arbitrary. So we went with a different, also very arbitrary method called above and beyond expectations, exceeding expectations, meeting expectations, below expectations, and failing expectations. Those expectations are based on Scotty and I's personal expectations for this player going into the season. So some players, like Jeff Petrie, for example, our expectations were pretty low, and he met them. So we put them in meeting expectations. You might disagree, which is perfectly fine. Again, it's all arbitrary.
Right. Petrie and Larkin did not have similar seasons production-wise. It's not.
Right. Their expectations were different from us. For above and beyond expectations, right now we have Albert Johansson and Elmer Soderblom. Exceeding expectations, which is a tier down, is Simon Edvinsson and Lucas Raymond. In meeting, we have Dylan Larkin, Tyler Mott, Cam Talbot, Andrew Kopp, Jeff Petrie, and Ben Charant. Below expectations is Craig Smith, Michael Rasmussen, and Alex Line. And in failing, so far we only have Justin Holl. Today we're going to lead off.
That's not who that is.
You're right. Sorry. That is Vladimir Tarasenko. Justin Holl was in failing expectations last year, and we were going to talk about Justin Holl today. So I got him in my head when I looked at failing expectations, which is ironic.
Just immediately was like, I know who's failing expectations.
We'll get there. That might not actually be the case, but that was the case last season when we talked about it. Moritz Seider, who we're leading off with today, Scotty. And I am going to be real with you. This is a guy who, and I don't think you'll disagree, we're lockstep on a lot of things. Last year was a tough year for him in regards to the fact that he was playing the toughest minutes with the toughest deployments, mostly in the defensive zone. And his underlying numbers did not look great in those minutes. But he was playing those minutes and still recorded 42 points while not getting power play one time. We put him, I think, last year in either meeting or exceeding expectations at the end of the season because we recognized what was asked of him, and it was a lot. This year, we expected him to perform better in that role, and honest to God, Scotty, he did. In my opinion, he was absolutely fantastic. He was one of the best two-way defensemen. I want to emphasize two-way defensemen because obviously there's guys like Cal McCarr, Zach Werenski, Quinn Hughes, your Norris finalists, who put up a lot of points and are great offensive first defensemen. But none of those guys get the deployments that Moritz Seider did. Again, another year getting some of the toughest deployments in the league. He put up 45 points, I believe, this year. Power play one quarterback. He was a top 10 defenseman in power play points this season as well, playing on one of the best power plays in the league. I felt like Moritz Seider was asked to do just as much, if not more, than he was last year. And this year, he was fantastic in that role. So for me personally, I'm ready to put him in exceeding expectations this year.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I think that it's really just a debate between meeting or exceeding, and that's how really just kind of subjective person to person on how you felt about him going into the year. Because I think that this was another really solid year. He obviously anchored the blue line. Was it 100% perfect? Obviously not, but this is a guy that took, I think, more steps forward. And I think one of the biggest things with that is just his increased role on special teams, right? Like last year, Gustafsson obviously got a lot of that power play time on the blue line, and because he's really good at that. And Seider played a lot more power play this year because of that. And I don't think, I mean, clearly it was one of the best power plays in the history of the franchise. Like, I don't think it missed a beat. So, if not, it got better. So I think that it's really easy to kind of put him in exceeding. And I think that the increased responsibility offensively is the big reason that I'm okay with that. Like, we know he's going to be really good defensively, but for him to take on more responsibility on the offensive zone, get more opportunities, even 5-on-5 opportunities. You mentioned the deployment. Right. And the offensive side of the zone, and to flourish in them and still hold down the fort, I think is really important. So, yeah, I'm okay with exceeding.
Yeah, he finished this season with a 50% Corsi 4 percentage, a 52% shooting 4 percentage, 50, almost 53% goals for, and a 50% expected goals for. I know those are all advanced metrics that some people don't care about. To me, they do matter to help add to what we're seeing on the ice. We know. But to be getting some of the most difficult deployments in the NHL, if not the most difficult deployments in the NHL, and have all of that at or above 50%, shows how much of an asset he is out there. So for me personally, it's exceeding expectations. He took the same deployments, actually more so, again, because of the power play one time, and built upon that and had a much better year with the eye test and the underlying analytics.
Yeah.
46 points, too, again, which is close to his career high. He set in his rookie year at 50. So, for me, he's exceeding expectations.
Yeah, works for me.
All right. I also love him. So, and again, this is arbitrary, so I'm going to let a little bit of the bias.
Look at his flow in that picture, man. That's a great head of hair right there.
With Seider, I know, makes me jealous. I never did.
Not with you. Who'd you think I was talking about?
What? No, Seider has great hair.
Yeah, I know, but you wanted to clarify that I was talking about Seider, even though we just talked about it.
Oh, I thought maybe you were talking about Kasper, who also has a nice head of hair, because he's next.
I was like,
although I do want to,
not you, man.
I do want to put Kasper off to next segment just because he's a longer conversation. So we're gonna leapfrog
We're
him.
not gonna do the order right now, actually.
Right now we're actually gonna talk about Jonatan Berggren because he's a quicker conversation. This is a guy, Scotty. He only this season produced 24 points in 75 games played. We brought him in and we were kind of hoping he would replace someone like Daniel Sprong. We know what he is. He's an offense-first shooting winger. And we were hoping he'd come in and he'd fill and replace some of that scoring in the bottom six, especially after the great year he had last year in Grand Rapids. We thought maybe with a couple years more seasoning, he could come into the NHL and be an effective bottom six, power play unit 2 shooter. But he only recorded 12 goals, 24 points in 75 games played. Where do you have him on your personal list?
Yeah, so this is a weird one because I think that if you were to ask me this question a year and a half ago, and you're like, hey, or how do I word this? If you were to ask me to base this off of my expectations for him a year and a half or even 2 years ago, I think it's a very different conversation than what my expectations were going into this year. This is a guy that, again, like you said, we expected and we wanted to be kind of that depth scoring option. And the Wings saw a lot of goals walk out the locker room this past summer. And this past summer, it's basically the summer again, last summer. And one of the things we were really counting on was for Berger to be a guy that can kind of, I don't know, fill that void a little bit, right? And he wasn't. I don't think that's like a stretch to say that he wasn't really that bottom six producer that we were kind of banking on him to be. That being said, I mean, he was literally demoted for a full season after playing over 60 games in the NHL the year prior. So, like, for us, I mean, I can remember talking about last summer how my expectations were wildly low. So it's just kind of a weird thing. I think it depends on exactly where, exactly the day that you asked me what my expectations were for him were going forward. I think if you're basing it off of my expectations, maybe 2 years ago, then it's well below. But if you're asking me based on going into the year, I mean, it's probably below or even meeting. Like I had very low expectations for him going into the season.
Well, I guess maybe that's where we differ, because I had a little bit higher expectations than what we got out of him going into the year, especially with how great he was with Grand Rapids last year, playing on that Kasper Mazur line. And in the playoffs, he was one of the guys that was leaned upon to score a lot of goals. Now, obviously, guys like Kasper and Mazur did a lot of the dirty work in the corners to feed him the puck, but when he got the puck on his stick, he finished his shot. I mean, he was his goal led to Game 5 against Milwaukee last year.
Right.
He was. I think he scored 2. Maybe did he score a hat trick in that game? I think he may have. And he was instrumental. So maybe my expectations were colored by how he performed in the American Hockey League, but I really had thought he had taken a step forward and was ready to be that bottom 6 guy in the bottom 6. And 0.32 points per game, just only 24 points, is a little bit lower than what I was expecting. Is that on me? Maybe I had too high of expectations. Possibly. They'll be definitely tempered going into next season, but for me personally, he did fall short of what I was hoping for.
I don't even think it's a guarantee he's in the lineup card to start off the season next season, so I'm okay with below because of that.
I mean, we were talking about him as a trade piece too in the offseason.
We were talking about him having his RFA status, we literally were talking about at one point the Red Wings being we don't necessarily need control over him if worse comes to worse, because it took so long. Veleno was the other one, right, where it took forever for him to sign a contract. And so we kind of grouped them together at one point early in the summer, and we're like, I don't even know if either of these guys have a guaranteed spot on the roster. So,
yeah. We have to head to a quick break, Scotty. When we return, we'll continue the conversation with Marco Kasper, so stay tuned to segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. When you start using Monarch, you're going to realize how much you are spending on food delivery, package delivery, subscriptions. Now you're going to budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check on your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Also got to talk to you guys today about Game Time. The Stanley Cup playoffs are here. Man, was that a thriller on Saturday night between the Dallas Stars and the Colorado Avalanche. And if you've never been to an NHL playoff game, it's unlike anything else. The intensity, the speed, the energy in the building, it's next level. And thanks to Game Time, getting in the door is easier and more affordable than ever. Game Time is the fastest way to grab playoff tickets, even for the most must-see matchups. Prices actually drop as puck drop gets closer, and with last-minute deals, you can save up to 60% for things like sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. Their all-in pricing shows the total up front, no surprise fees at checkout, and the app even gives you panoramic seat views so you know exactly what you're getting before you buy. And with the Game Time ticket coverage, you know you're protected, whether it's cancellation protection, job loss assurance, or their 24-hour return guarantee. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. All right, Scotty, Marco Kasper. This is a really fun one to talk about. Honestly, could have been a headliner if we didn't have so many fun players to talk about this season, which is crazy to talk about or even say, considering it was a disappointing season overall. But there were some individual performers this year that really keeps the optimism alive with where this rebuild is going. And Marco Kasper is one of those players. He had a surprise breakout season, 37 points in 77 games played, the bulk of which came after Todd McClellan took over and promoted him to the top 6, playing on the wing with Lucas Raymond and Dylan Larkin, centering Alex DeBrincat and Patrick Kane. I think under McClellan, he was on like a 50-point pace. Great season from Marco Kasper. Where do you have him?
Yeah, for me, this is kind of a layup in exceeding expectations. I obviously had a really great year. Going into the season, I kind of expected him to show flashes, but still be kind of a I don't know, like a rookie at the end of the day, right? And still kind of take his lumps or whatnot. And not that it was again, like a perfect season. He did and had his ebbs and flows, but I mean, for him to, by the end of the season, be either like genuinely either or with confidence on any given night, be the second line center or the top line winger, and know that whichever of those he ended up being, that the fan base and the coaching staff were going to have confidence in that play, I think is a massive win. Now, expectations were higher than most rookies, I would say. But he certainly matched, if not exceeded those in my eyes. I think that based on again, kind of the role that he took over, especially once the calendar year flipped, I was absolutely blown away by him, and especially like given the first few weeks, first, I don't know, month and a half. The production was kind of slow, and for him to just continue grinding and work his way out of that, and to become, one of the fixtures in that top 6, I think is unbelievably impressive.
Yeah, I mean, he finished the season with almost a 51% Corsi for percentage. That's 5-on-5 shot attempt share. So when he was on the ice, the team produced over 50% of the shot attempts for either team, which is fantastic. That's at 5-on-5. His expected goals for percentage was almost 52%. So like the underlying numbers also suggest that he was great. And like the only reason he's not an above and beyond is because he did have a quiet first half of the season under Derek Lalonde. He was great on the bottom 6, right? He was centering that third line for a long time, and anyone they put on his wings, they felt like that was a dangerous line, but they just could never convert. But the moment Todd McClellan came in, had him playing a more loose game and putting him in the top 6, like you could tell that playing on in those minutes with those players really helped him gain confidence and grow. And then once he got pushed to the second line, I say pushed like it's not technically a promotion for him to go back to center, but he became the second line center. I mean, honestly, Andrew Kopp may have lost his job as the second-line center to Marco Kasper with how well they were playing, and that's not a bad thing. Andrew Kopp's going to be a phenomenal third-line center, especially with how good he is defensively. $5.6 million is a lot to pay for a third-line center, but I digress. He'll be good in that role. I think that quiet first half is the only reason for me he's not an above and beyond expectations. I think he's, like you said, a layup for exceeding.
Yeah. I think it's a combination of quiet first half and just, again, preseason expectations being higher. Like, this dude is one of him and Danielson are the two highest regarded forwards in the farm system going into the year. So I think it's probably just a combination of those two things for sure. But this was a great year, and I think he certainly surpassed what we kind of laid out and wanted to see from him on the season.
Mm-hmm. So next up, Scotty, is JT Compher. Yeah, this is a guy who really struggled to find the back of the net this season. Yeah, last season, he had a great year, honestly. Like, the first year of his contract, it looked like a good signing by Steve Yzerman. He had 19 goals, 29 points for 29 assists for 48 points in 77 games played. Almost a 50-point season. I think his career high was 52, so just 4 points shy of his career high he set the year before that with the Colorado Avalanche. Solid year from JT Compher. He set a career high in goals. Then going into this year, he really struggled to find the back of the net. 76 games, 11 goals, 21 assists for 32 points, taking a steep step back and just not just finding the back of the net, but honestly just effectiveness on the ice. I mean, this is a guy who going into the season, we were like, okay, well, he's at least your 2C for now, to maybe going into next year, if he's still on the roster, 4C, which is crazy to talk about because how effective he was the year prior. But yeah, Scotty, where do you have him?
Yeah, man, I I'll be real with you. I think there's a real argument for failing. You know, if that's too dramatic, like I'm okay with just below. Like he wasn't just completely useless out there on the ice. Like I'm okay with hedging that a little bit. But this is a guy that is paid a lot of money and was absolutely between what he is, you know, the contract that the Wings gave him and what he did a year ago had expectations of being the solidified 2C. And could you imagine how different this, like we were saying by the end of the year, man, they just need one more player in that top 6. Well, you had one and he completely fell off a cliff. And like Tarasenko's in that conversation too. You signed him to be that and he didn't end up being that either. So like if either of those guys play like what was expected of them going into the year, the top 6 looks even more dynamic than it already kind of was. And I think a lot of that responsibility falls on Compher's shoulders. He does a lot outside of filling the back of the net, which is why I'm like, okay, again, if you want to hedge it like a little bit and just put him in below, like he's a good defender that you appreciate on the ice in that regard. He's going to, you know, play some pretty high IQ hockey, but like this was honestly a really, really brutal season for Compher to the point where now I think there's going to be conversations this summer surrounding like, if you can find a way to get this contract off the books, do you take it? And if you would have told me that was even remotely on the table going into this season, I would have said that's super disappointing.
Yeah, this is a guy, like last year, again, I was super high on, but I think you can put him in failing expectations because it's not just about the production either. Like all the underlying numbers suggest he was one of the worst forwards on your team. You take Christian Fischer out, right? Because he's no longer on the team. He gets picked up off waivers by the Columbus Blue Jackets. He is your worst forward by the books. Because I don't count Dominic Shine, who played 9 games. He played 76 games. He was your worst forward at Corsi. 4 percentage, your shot attempt share, that is, 44%. Your expected goals for percentage, he was above Jonatan Berggren and Tyler Mott, but he still came in at 46%, well under 50. You look at the relative statistics, right? Because then you take those numbers, relative takes those numbers, and then compares it with their teammates.
Right.
He was also a solid negative, and your worst forward at Corsi 4 relative, negative 6%. Yeah. Negative 6%. Like, it's not just the production and the eye test, it's also like the underlying numbers. Everything this year suggested he fell well below what we were expecting out of him. And that sucks because I like JT Compher. He's a nice player. He just had an underwhelming year.
Yeah, and I think the point you made at the very beginning of the conversation is honestly probably the best legs to stand on, where it's just like, going into this year, he was the solidified 2C, and by the end, we're talking about him next year being whatever $6-7 million 4C, and that's just kind of unacceptable given the expectations in the contract. So
5-1, but still $5 million for a 4C is tough. That's a hard pill to swallow.
Far different from 7 though, so fair to point out.
Yeah. It makes it a little bit easier to swallow knowing that Kasper is your 2C making, entry-level contract numbers, but still you don't want to be paying your potential 4C 5
Right,
million.
but imagine if both.
right.
Imagine if you get $5.1 million production and you have, Marco's production. So
right. All right, we're going to head to segment 3, head to another quick break. When we return, we'll finish up with Justin Holl and Erik Gustafsson. Stay tuned to segment 3 of Locked On Red Wings. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives you business flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivers incredible results. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day with multiple qualified candidates to choose from. Instead of hiring full-time, Upwork helps find affordable, top-tier freelancers to scale your business efficiently. Visit Upwork.com right now to post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with top talent and grow your businesses today. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. All right, Scotty, 2 more guys to cover on this episode. That is Erik Gustafsson and Justin Holl. Let's start with Erik Gustafsson, just quite simply because his face is first on the tier list. Another guy that really underwhelmed this year. Only 18 points in 60 games played. That's a 0.3 point per game pace. Obviously had a season-ending injury just as he was starting to play a little bit better under Todd McLellan. But, I mean, this is a guy you brought in to be Shane Gostisbehere light, right? We were going into the season, our expectations were he's not going to produce as much as Gostisbehere, but he's still going to be a power play quarterback that can get you points and maybe be marginally better defensively. Because the underlying, people probably hate the phrase underlying numbers, but the underlying numbers suggested he was better defensively than Shane Gostisbehere, and that just was not anywhere close to being true.
Correct. I don't even think there's really too much else to say. This was a very disappointing season. I think we at least expected him to be kind of that offensive forward, and he wasn't that even at all. And I think the second half was maybe a little bit better than the first half, but I don't think the Red Wings got nearly close to the production they wanted out of him for sure.
Yeah, so the argument is this below or failing?
I don't know, man.
I think this might be failing, honestly.
I'm fine with that, yeah.
And this is a little unfair to him because he was starting to play better under Todd McLellan, but then he had the injury. Like, if the injury does not happen and he is able to play those last, 22 games of his season, he might have done enough to pull himself out of the failing category. But just solely based on the sample size we got, he didn't do anywhere close to what we were expecting. And what's crazy is you look at his history, right? He's had such a seesaw career. Like, he'll have a season where he scores 60 points, and then go to 26 the next, and then 13 the next, and then 18, but then back up to 38, then to 31, then 8. Like, his scoring is so inconsistent throughout his career, but we just got the version of him that does not score a lot of points, unfortunately, this season. So I think it's not out of the realm of possibility to put him in failing expectations.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. He was getting healthy at one point.
Right. Scotty, this is a fun conversation. Justin Holl, another guy who's hated by the fan base. Maybe I shouldn't say hated. A guy who's disliked by the fan base. That's the nicer way of putting it.
I was like, what else do you want to say? Yeah.
It's frustrating because, you sign Justin Holl to a 3-year, $3.15 million or whatever it is. You give him a partial no trade list, and we initially defended it. We were like, he's not as bad as people said. Like, that's just Toronto media and Toronto fans being Toronto. Like, they're scapegoating him like they do every player that's on their team. And then he comes here, he plays 38 games his first season as a healthy scratch most of the time for a guy who's getting paid $3 million. Our expectations for him going into this year because of that were like rock bottom. I think our expectations were be an everyday player. So crazy enough as it sounds, as much as I still don't love the player, right? Like on the ice, I think he's still not a great player. Did he not meet or maybe exceed our expectations going into the year?
Yeah, I refuse to put him in exceed, but I can go with me. Yeah. The expectations for him going into last summer were not beyond the team. So, like, the fact that he was even on the roster on opening night was kind of a mild surprise. And yeah, like, I don't think he was like, wow, this is a way better version of him. It's just like he played. Like, that's really the only difference. Like, he just played games. And I think that was more out of necessity than it was because they were like really impressed with how he looked on the ice.
Right. And like, this is a guy that I still think the team can improve upon at that position. Like, at his slot, I think you could bring in somebody else to improve this defense. But He played a very sheltered role. He and Gustafsson were an incredibly sheltered pair, getting a lot of offensive zone starts and playing against very soft competition. The other team's worst players, they're playing like 15 minutes a night. But in that role, he put up some of the best underlying numbers on the team. Like, out of the defensemen, he and Gustafsson actually had the best Corsi for percentage, the best expected goals for percentage. Just playing super soft deployments because they knew what they had. They could not put them in situations that were difficult defensively. So it's like one of those things where his numbers look good because of the way they utilized him. Like, we have to understand that they put him in a position where if he couldn't succeed, that's really, really concerning. But we also understand that they put him in a situation where it was really, really, I wouldn't say easy. It's the NHL. Nothing's easy. But, compare that to what Moritz Seider was playing. It's night and day. That's why Moritz Seider was playing as difficult as minutes as you could, because you couldn't trust Holl or Gustafsson in that role. Our expectation for Holl was just to play every day, and he did. And so I guess he meets.
Yeah, I think meets. He was yeah.
Like, next year, probably not. Like, our expectation will be, okay, like, play every day and be competent.
I mean, who's to say he's even on the roster and on opening night?
Again, part of our conversation last year was this guy needs to go, and
right.
He stayed. And I don't know. It's really fascinating because his underlying numbers make it look like he was an excellent defenseman, but you also just have to have that context. It's like, okay, those numbers are great, but he played the softest deployments out of almost any defenseman in the NHL against the softest competition. It's just like, it's such a dichotomy with Justin Holl. But he played every day, and that's what we were expecting. So he met expectations technically by our standards.
Sure.
It feels weird. It feels so off-putting.
Sure.
Scotty, we have 4 players left. That's DeBrincat and Patrick Kane, because you got to keep those two guys together. Peter Mrazek, who's a deadline acquisition, and Austin Watson. We'll talk about those guys on our final episode of Player Evaluations at probably Tuesday, because will be Wednesday's episode, actually, more than likely, because obviously Tuesday's episode will be Griffin's recap. Before we send it off, do you have any final thoughts?
We ball.
We do ball. Be back with a new episode tomorrow. Same time, same place. See your team every day.